What's up, and welcome to another great, new, exciting episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 234.
234.
I am Steve.
I'm John.
I'm Ron.
And that is all of us.
Or are we our tethered selves from some other realm? If you were your tethered, Ronald, what would your name be? You notice they all had different names in the movie. Us, which is what we're talking about today, if that's not obvious already.
Biff. I'd be Biff.
I think I'd be Bama.
Bama? Oh man, I think they would catch on to my Malacca use, and I would probably be Malacca.
I like that.
Yeah. Or Navets. Navets. People used to call me my name backwards, which would be kind of funny.
I like
Well, that's good.
Yeah, Navets. But yeah, man, I'm really excited to kind of make this happen. I mean, I know we're a little late to the game, but it's a little safer. We might go into a little spoiler territory. We'll give you guys a heads up, obviously, before we do that, in case people listening haven't seen the new Jordan Peele joint, which is called Us, his second feature film, which is in theaters now. And if you've been unless you've been living under a rock, you know what the basic premise of this film is, and that it's, was a huge record opening last weekend, both just for the horror genre, for original filmmaking, not based on an existing IP and anything like that. It had a pretty amazing opening, just over $71 million for the weekend, which is just, wow. And it's exciting. And, if you listen to this podcast, that we love Jordan Peele, so it's exciting for him and Monkey Paw Productions, his production house, and just like everything they're doing is just like, it's just working right now. And it's a good time to be a fan of Jordan Peele's and to see what he's got coming up. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about this one for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, same. And we've actually been kind of quiet on the social media, at least amongst ourselves.
Yeah,
so I'm actually very interested to hear how everybody feels about the movie. And then there's this whole other discussion, as you're kind of alluding to, Steve, of just the importance of what Jordan Peele represents at this moment. I've really almost had to work to separate my feelings about the hype around the movie from just what this was as a movie.
Yeah. It's hard, especially since we get the South by Southwest reactions way before the critics outside of the ones that saw it at South by Southwest, the people that just attended that event.
Right.
So we had it came in layers. So you get like the average fan combined with the critics' reaction, and it's hyper positive. Then you get the critics one that kind of happens right after that, and then the first week happens, and then you kind of see how that happens. And I wondered on the second week how people would feel about it, just because this one was a little more challenging than Get Out. I feel like Get Out was a little more palatable. It felt like a nice, neat package.
Yes.
And I feel like this explored things. It did a lot more world building, and it challenged the watcher a little more than Get Out. And I wonder how people felt about it. And there were some extreme reactions to that challenge in that.
I think it was both more challenging and a little bit more messy in a way.
Yeah.
When you talk about the neat, tidy bow that Get Out was tied up in terms of what the narrative was and what it was clearly referring to, and how you could pretty much make this 1-to-1 ratio of what the movie was treating as an allegory and then what it was commenting on. And I did not personally expect him to repeat any of that.
It's always interesting to kind of just, after the fact, you've taken, at least I've tried to take in the film on its face value for it itself as a movie, and, what he was trying to say or do or build in this one. And then, you can draw comparisons to Get Out. You can compare them after the fact. But for me, it was just an excitement to see what he was going to do now with like a bigger budget, not even a big budget, but a bigger budget, especially by Blumhouse standards. This budget for this film, was like $20 million, which is, is a larger budget for a Blumhouse film. But it's that's exciting to me, and I think he's just got such a good handle on the genre, and listening to him speak about the genre and like, about the themes or, what he's trying to say in his films, both in the things that he's being explicit about and the things that he's being ambiguous about that, kind of open up the conversation for us to talk about like something like on something like this podcast or just amongst our friends and peers that have seen it. But like, I just genuinely feel that like he is such a special person, a special voice in the genre. And, I just was excited to see what the next thing was from him without really trying to carry any expectation in from what I felt about Get Out. And it's interesting, like you were kind of mentioning, John, it's like, he's very, outspoken about not making another Get Out, and trying to kind of upend what people's expectations are of like what the next movie was going to be about and, that kind of thing. And I just like listening to him kind of lay that out for people, or lay it down for people. Just like, I listened to him on a podcast recently and he just was saying like interesting things about, like, oh, the next movie you're going to make is obviously going to be about race. And he was like, I kind of take that expectation and that may be a part of what I'm saying, but a movie like Us is talking about much bigger things than just race. It's a part of the conversation, but there are things at play that speak to a bigger issue or another big issue in our country. And, that's what he's saying, a lot of what he's saying in this film. But I don't know, man. Like, he just seems like a unicorn to me. And I don't mean to like overinflate it or oversell him, but I really just believe he's like such a unique thing that we have across platforms, TV, movies. And it's just a really exciting time to be a fan of somebody like Jordan Peele. And, that's kind of like, my take on him and what he's doing for the format, both on television and movies and just for genre filmmaking as a whole. It's just it's a really great feat that he's accomplished with the first two films that he's made. And, he's got the Twilight Zone coming out shortly and a bunch of other stuff that we've talked about on the podcast before. But it was a pretty big expectation going into this film. Not just as a comparison to Get Out, but just because I really do admire him so much in terms of what he's trying to do and what he's trying to say. For the genre, for fans of the genre, and for people that want to see the genre be embraced by wider audiences, that to understand that the genre is something that should be embraced and acknowledged.
I really came into it wanting to have a unique look at this. I kind of felt like this would be the Nicholas Winding Refn sort of second movie where he would make a movie so different that it would upset people, and I think that it worked in a really cool way. One thing that felt very different about this movie versus the first one is that, and this is not giving anything away, is like it felt I know it referenced the 80s and the early 90s, but it felt pacing wise like some of the horror films that I remember as a kid. Just that it let the story breathe. It like the world building was happening around you, and that happened a little bit with Get Out. But something about this felt a little more like, this is all gonna pay off. Keep watching, pay attention to everything.
Right.
This is all gonna pay off, and it felt like none of the frames were wasted. I felt like there was, every time I looked at something, a sound or the soundtrack went, I was like, it made me tense. And then once the action picked up, it all started to get a little crazy, which I loved. So I came in not wanting to feel like I was carrying the baggage of Get Out, but I couldn't help it.
Jordan Peele is being overrated and underrated at the same time. Like, there's people who are trying to turn this movie into the greatest horror movie ever made.
Right.
And I think it's interesting to see the movies that people are in a hurry to put in that spot versus the movies that there's hype about, and then there's this kind of, disappointment in, like, a movie that I love, like The Witch, where a lot of people afterwards say, well, that wasn't really that scary, and I personally didn't think Get Out was that scary in terms of the jump scares or whatever people mean when they say scary.
Yeah, definitely not.
I had heard that Us was going to be scarier than Get Out, so maybe that was the one thing I was kind of expecting, was that this was going to be more of a straight horror. But that in itself is different from what Get Out was. So I think this whole idea of trying to define what the genre of horror is, I've sort of developed this opinion that anyone who is overly concerned with defining it is not that big of a fan of the movies themselves. Us has certain elements that put it squarely in the realm of horror, but it has other elements that put it in the realm of almost like a fantasy or like a parable that really is even more of an allegory for society in terms of how it works. Because there's a lot of kind of dream logic and sort of just magic logic in Us that there wasn't in Get Out. Us goes in a totally different direction that almost has a methological or dark fairy tale kind of feel to it. Clearly the guy knows exactly what he's doing, and the more I think about it, these kind of memes that he creates. I mean, we had the sunken place after Get Out, and I mean, we already joked about our tethered selves in this one. So I kind of feel like there's 5 or 10 other things in that movie that can be plucked out by the culture and turned into something that will last. And so I think we've commented on that aspect of Jordan Peele. Maybe it comes from his background in comedy and, you know, his ability to come up with catchphrases and memorable characters and stuff. But he seems to kind of know when he's got a detail or a hook that's going to stick with you, even if it exists outside the context of the movie in your mind. Did you kind of feel that, like the magic of just his knack for creating that sort of iconic moment or image?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think the one movie I can think of that made me think about like imaging and stuff like that. 2 movies stand out of my head is The First Nightmare on Elm Street and like The Shining. These movies that have these moments that are you could tell that when the director was making these movies, he was like, this is it. This is gonna be the thing that people are gonna shudder about or imagine. Or I think that Jordan Peele has a very It's like he has the mechanics of an old school director. He has the chops of an old school director, but he also has the new school idea that iconology, things that are open to interpretation, symbolism, all very important with memes and stills that you can put on the internet. He knows that these things could be a lot more relevant than they would have been 10 years ago. So making these things very apparent, very in your face, having the right music under it as well, he knows this kind of formula to create, you know, formulaically a good horror film, right? But then also this iconology that kind of will rest in your head forever. I cannot stop thinking about this movie since I've seen it, bits and pieces about it, faces that were made in the movie, darkness and faces, you know, kind of peering through the darkness. Some of this shit I cannot forget, man. And it's very purposefully done.
Yeah, it's interesting like that. You mentioned the you know, how you feel like he's kind of got like this mix of old and new school. I think it's interesting because there is something about like Get Out, and even in some ways more so Us, like that he does manage to kind of insert those things like the tethered and the golden shears and like the red jumpsuit and the glove, you know, where in some cases he's kind of paying homage to certain things from the genre maybe, but like, you know, where he's obviously making a choice of, you know, like this film is going to be the one that people think about like scissors as the item, you know, that's used as the weapon of destruction. And, you know, like I feel like that is a conscious decision on his part because, you know, these you know, like I don't know, I just feel like it could be a knife, it could be so many things that have been used so many times before, but I can't help but think that there was a conversation like, you know, oh, but this hasn't been done, and think of the imagery of the posters and what magic they've done with the marketing using the scissors, you know, that play, you know, prominently in the film as a weapon, but also as, like you said, symbolism for what the movie's even about. And I just think that there's some sort of mental game that he's balanced really well with, you know, having things that, you know, you walk away with the movie thinking about, like the sunken place or the, you know, the teacup and the spoon and like all these things that you'll just never forget. that does set it apart from some films that you might not remember things. Like even John mentioning The Witch, it did a good job of having something like, people talk about that Black Phillip, the goat.
Would you like to live deliciously?
Right.
That line. I saw that pop up a lot.
These things that you do have in your film that you've got to know as a filmmaker or a writer, whoever actually comes up with the idea, that this is going to be the takeaway in terms of just that iconography for a genre film that are going to make people talk about the movie and represent the movie in ways that a review never would, or just not that a review can't, or word of mouth can't. Like you're talking about memes and social media, like that just takes the film going experience in today's world to a level that films of the past never had to compete with. And it does seem interesting that Jordan does really have a really good, pulse on what is going on with that kind of stuff for people that walk away from his films. And even when they had Key and Peele going, he still was doing that, very effectively with so many of their episodes and their sketches. And it just obviously feeds into what he's doing now. But yeah, you walk away from Us and there's any number of things that in my mind that I keep thinking about beyond even the narrative or the story or what it all means, just literal, just items and aesthetics and these concepts of the tethered and things like that just you can't shake, and that only helps, in my opinion, that only helps the film going experience and how I feel about the movie after the fact. Even
he's done his homework. He loves a lot of the same classic horror films that fans of the genre already like.
Absolutely.
And then he is doing something different, not just because of his point of view, really, but who he is and the time he's making movies, and all of that's very exciting. And you keep hearing people talk about he's the next M. Night Shyamalan, he's the next Steven Spielberg, he's the next Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And I actually have thought about those last two a lot, because I was like, this whole Twilight Zone thing is very much like an Alfred Hitchcock or Steven Spielberg thing, where his name and face is all over this show, but he's really not going to be the guy who writes and directs any of the episodes that I know of. Maybe he's going to dip in and do one or two, but as executive producer, it's like he's got the clout now in that Spielberg way.
That's
to
true.
Say, this guy signing on is going to be what sweetens it for someone to sign on. Oh, is Jordan Peele's involved? Maybe he's the one making calls. Maybe he is picking directors and writers and shaping stories. Who knows how actively involved he is, but you see his name on it.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of when it used to be like Steven Spielberg Presents or produced by Steven Spielberg. And, it was a cottage industry within Hollywood. And Alfred Hitchcock, same way. He shows up and introduces every episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but I don't think he wrote and directed those. I think he just kind of, his imprint was on it, and there was a certain quality control that had to do with his operation. And it's interesting to me that Jordan Peele is at that spot right now, where Twilight Zone is going to be sort of like a brand expansion for him.
Yeah.
I guess we should get into the movie itself.
Yeah.
What are some of the strengths? What are some of the things he walked away with?
I'd say the strength to me were the characters. This is one of the movies, you know how we feel about kid actors. They suck. And this is one of those movies where the kid actors excelled in a way that I just really loved the dynamic between the parents and the kids. And then when things got a little more serious, I really liked the dynamic that they had between them. The little subtle things, the little things that kind of made you wonder. Obviously, the best part of this movie, acting-wise, is Lupita. She fucking killed it.
Yeah, wow.
I was taken aback, honestly, by how layered the performance was. There were things that made me uncomfortable that that wound up becoming unraveling at the end.
Right.
But yeah, I think the strong thing at the very heart of it is the characters. The unfolding of the story, part of me feels like it could have been done a little better.
Yes.
But overall, I think the story and the roots of it and the explanation were done really well. So that's what pops up in my head right now. That's what's in my head.
Yeah, you can't talk about this movie without talking about Lupita, like, front and center. That is an amazing performance. She's just doing something kind of on both sides of that coin, this dual role. She's doing something amazing in both roles. And I have to say that one of the things about her her performance in the role of Red, that was her name in the credits, Lupita's double.
Correct, yeah.
Her red jumpsuit double. It borders on ridiculous when she starts talking. And yet it works. The creep factor of it is so strong. It sucks you in. But I loved those kind of chances that were taken. Tim Heidecker is another performer who gets to do some things in this that are reminiscent of what he might have done in a particularly bizarre sketch on Tim and Eric, but it's got this different context. You can see what Jordan Peele was doing in the moment, and that he had the trust of these performers, and he trusted these performers, and he cast it really well. And there's some amazing things. I mean, Lupita is obviously the main ingredient, but I thought the more I think about what Winston Duke is doing in this movie, I think it's a really funny performance, and it's kind of one of those performances that comments on the kind of uselessness of men,
right.
in a way that is not a one-dimensional critique. It kind of shows the ways in which he's a good father and he's a loving husband, and he really is trying to hang in there and be supportive of everybody, but he's just clueless about what's really going on, and he really has to be told in the harshest terms that he's not helping at a certain point.
Right.
I read somewhere that he said he based the performance on Homer Simpson, and it clicked for me in this beautiful way that I was like, that is so brilliant that he did that, because it really is like a doofus. I mean, he's a little silly, a little cartoonish, including in a scene where he's fighting and he's not really handling himself that well. He's kind of pitiful in some scenes, you know. And that makes you root for him and makes you worry about him, but it also is an interesting character to support this other role.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you guys have said. I mean, the performances stand out. One of the other things that really stood out to me was I just felt like overall I was really impressed. Like, just the direction itself was like an obvious next step for Jordan Peele. I just felt like the shot composition, I mean, Get Out had its look and, like, you know, a palette, and I mean, there's some interesting stuff, like, after the fact, looking at a lot of, like, the color tones and things like that between the two films, and how much that shifts in this film to a different color scheme altogether, and a lot of the cinematography and blocking, there just seemed to be like another level operating in terms of like filmmaking in this film, you know, for him and for his entire cast. And like you guys were saying, like, I just felt like, you know, even the supporting cast, I felt like that scene with Elizabeth Moss when she's kind of sitting in front of the vanity, I thought just sitting there for like a minute, just like kind of musing as she has access to this thing that she's never accessed before. It just, I mean, like, even something small like that, which is almost a throwaway scene in the grand scheme of this film, it's not, because like the cast is just all in and is just there to bring it.
I would watch a whole movie of her and Tim Heidecker's characters being shitty and passive aggressive with each other.
And hating each other. Yeah.
Me too.
We love her already. I've loved her from Mad Men.
For sure, yeah.
And I loved her in The One I Love, The One You Love.
The One I Love, I think, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Hey, that was another movie with creepy doubles in it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
right?
Interesting.
The other thing I was going to mention was, like, I just think that it's really cool that, you know, he has you know, the main characters of our film, you know, are a black family, but it has nothing to do with the fact that they're a black family. They're just the lead family in this horror film. And I think that's like a really important thing that he is really showing should be better represented, you know, in his efforts and even in comments he's made recently about his decisions with casting, because he made a great point, is that, like, this has nothing to do with the fact that, you know, in the grand scheme of what this movie is saying, that this family, you know, is a black family. The film is not, you know, what a lot of people probably expect it to be when it comes to that. I just think it's amazing that they are just this normal family, you know, that something bad is happening to, but it has nothing to do with that factor. And you know, it seems like that's always got to be something that means more than it is. But I mean, like, you know, his efforts in showing this film, you know, in terms of what it's about and, like, you know, reflecting us as a country, and this is what our country looks like, you know, like, this is representation. And I mean, we've been talking about this a lot lately with different kinds of movies representing different kinds of underrepresented, you know, groups of people. And I think that, you know, it succeeds so well in that factor from the beginning of the film to the very end that never once is anything. Like, I get sick of people, like, saying, like, you know, things kind of felt like kind of forced or heavy-handed, or like this is just like doing this because it needs, you know, he's a black filmmaker doing this. And I don't understand people that say that, because it's not a factor in what this movie is about, or ultimately what people are going to walk away from the theater thinking. You're just watching a family go through something horrific, and I just think that works so well in the movie. And I just think that the idea of having Lupita in this lead role, which is crazy that this is like her first ever lead role. This is like an Oscar winner, who's just pretty great in everything that she does. But it just seems very, important that she got a lead role. And like you've all been saying, and I totally agree, she just like absolutely is amazing. And this is a family that, you care about from the moment that you're in that car with them at the opening of the film, and that you just buy into, almost like, everybody's been comparing that family dynamic to like Poltergeist. And that is I think that's a good comparison, because, immediately with both of those scenarios, with those families, like, from the beginning of your interaction with them, you buy into the fact that there's humor in this family, that there's trust in this family, that there's respect. You just are told so much in only a few scenes, and that's something that is an accomplishment, and
yeah, it is.
It makes the whole movie work for me.
I was trying to think if I had anything else to really say about this before we move into what might be considered spoiler territory. Ronald, do you have any other kind of general thoughts about the movie?
Just that, like Steve was saying, I really just like I talked about this a lot. I mean, especially since we've been doing the podcast for so many years, just wanting to see stories that just so happen to be about Black people, just so happen to be about minorities, just so happen to be about women being leads and funny. And this is something's happening, and it's more than a fad, and I love that it's happening at the pace that it's happening. There's stuff happening on TV as well, and it just made me super happy, on top of it just being an interesting movie. So yeah, that's all.
It's interesting, like it's like a no-brainer when you think about what you're saying and like what I'm trying to articulate, and it's no coincidence that you have a film come along like Black Panther, or a film like Captain Marvel, or even this film, a film who respectively had the biggest box office of its year, had the biggest box office for a woman in the lead role, had the biggest box office in the past decade for an original film. And these are all films that are showing underrepresented people of this country and of the world. And like, that's not a coincidence. That's because the world is made up of every kind of person, and it's just not happening enough that people that identify with that can go to a movie and be like, yeah, like you just said, Ronald, like that is somebody that I identify with, or that's somebody that, a woman that looks like me, or, I could be that person, or I could be that superhero, or she is me, or whatever. It's just mind-blowing to me the more I think about all this stuff. And I mean, I consider all of us to be very in tune to like the industry and like what's going on and like, what's coming down the pipeline. But, when you just think about those three movies, just the most recent ones that even come to mind, and you talk about the records that they're breaking and the bar that they're setting for, just box office stuff alone.
And how much the culture has embraced them and like given them this other meaning,
Yeah, like what's missing from this equation that you guys that you guys, quote unquote, like Hollywood, the people that make decisions, people are talking to you. People are voting with their dollar, with their time. This is what you need to be making more of, to satisfy, people that want entertainment that is relatable. And it's just amazing that it's been, growing more recently and improving more recently. And you see more, representation in film and TV, like Ronald was saying, that it's great to see a movie open to $70+ million with primarily Black cast leading the film, a Black filmmaker. And it's just like, but really it has nothing to do with the movie. Like, this is a movie that everybody can watch.
And everybody wanted to see.
Yeah, like everybody's dying to see this film. And it's just important to acknowledge that and to say, like, we want more of that, do more of that. Go, your dollar, your box office dollar is what's going to tell them that should be the case. And it's happening, and we're benefiting from it because great stuff is coming out that is, showcasing that kind of stuff.
You guys have probably seen this story about Jordan Peele saying that he doesn't see any reason why in the foreseeable future why he would need to create a story that he would devote his time to that would have a white dude as the lead. And
Right,
I
yeah.
I honestly have seen more people in support of that statement than expressing some backlash. But I'm to understand that, in the usual predictable way, Twitter has erupted with people saying that that's racist of him. And to me, it's so crazy to picture that sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't aspect. That it's
man.
like it's all about telling your own stories. But then when people try to tell their own stories, some people are like, well, why am I not centered in your story? And he didn't even say he'll never cast white actors. He said he doesn't see himself needing to do that, or it's just like he's seen that movie, I think is what he said.
Oh yeah.
He said, I could put a white guy in these movies, but I've seen that movie, so I'm not going to do that. He's given great roles to like Bradley Whitford and Catherine Keener and Elizabeth Moss and Tim Heidecker. So clearly the guy's not saying like, hey, I'm not going to put any white people in my movies.
Right.
Just the fact that he's saying I don't think they need to be the lead of my movies because I can bring what I want to bring. He's actually saying what you guys are alluding to, that's part of his plan to actually represent diversity and new voices, new faces, and everything. Without it, as you were saying, Steve, without it necessarily having to be a message about that. And I think as we go into spoiler territory, we can talk a little bit about what the message of this movie might have been. That might actually be a good place to start with that. So if you're listening and you haven't seen the movie and you want to preserve some surprises, we're saying go see this, right? Not one of us is cautioning people.
No, go see. This is a go ahead for sure for me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
So let's go underground, guys, and talk a little bit about what the message of this, what the end of this movie means, what the overall effect of it was. What did you think if this was an allegory? Which I think we've all said we don't think this was a neat and tidy allegory like Get Out was. But if this was an allegory, what was it an allegory for? What was this weird fairy tale about?
Good question. I mean, the line of the film that really kind of stood with me after leaving it, and I think about like trying to parse it all out, is the line that Red delivers, that she just says, "We are Americans." Part of my takeaway is almost like the flip of a coin in terms of opportunity in this country, and the ability to have and have not, and how it's not all like genuinely decided in any good manner, and it really is not something that probably should be decided by anybody but someone's efforts, and giving access to people to be able to try, because the more you kind of think about a lot of even the twist, and even the beyond, before you get to the twist of the film, you can see that he's really trying to say something about just systemic repression, and just trying to separate and yet still control people by any means, I guess, or by means that you think you have control of as an overseer, or whoever the they was that we don't really get much information on. But I don't know. I just think about the idea of just saying like, I'm basically just like you, but for whatever reason I'm not given the opportunity that you are, and I'm not afforded the life that you are, because I'm less than you in some way, and it's kind of a wild idea to play with in a horror film.
Yeah, the less fortunate are not. I think there's a narrative that's kind of built in this country where people say they're pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, but that normally comes at the cost of someone's freedom, someone's liberties,
Right.
And what happens is if you don't give back to the community that is less fortunate, they'll take it back, through whatever means there is.
Right.
Women's rights are at this crazy crossroads where exposure and fearlessness is being put at the forefront. There was a lot of fear, but the fear was the barricade between fear and expression was oppression, and oppression can be superseded by these forces which are bigger than us sometimes. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you're in the middle of something happening. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I was in the middle of the uprising in Baltimore, and there were a lot of things happening, right? But at the heart of it, someone being killed created this chaos, and the people that felt like they had been, treated poorly spoke up. you know? And sometimes it's not the way you want to hear it. Sometimes it's very loud and disruptive, and I think that's what this represents. This was the disruptive cry out of the people that are kind of in the underbelly of society, or at least what we perceive to be the underbelly.
Yeah, and that the people that are on the so-called surface are the people who are living their lives innocently, and we see them as good people, and we totally relate to the family in this. And then they themselves are kind of coveting, or at least the Winston Duke character, Gabe, is kind of coveting.
Josh and Kitty.
Josh and Kitty have more than our main family has, and Gabe is like kind of openly jealous of that and is doing things to maybe kind of try to appeal to Josh.
Yeah.
And I think that we see that Adelaide is not distracted by those things because, as we discover later, she's got much more on her mind than he does. But as far as just that kind of class critique, it exists within the story. Anytime there's an other, our ability to be happy and be blissfully ignorant is determined by our ability to ignore the suffering of people that make our sort of middle-class lives possible. Nobody is off the hook for this societal problem, even if they are themselves working hard and just trying to get what's theirs and just trying to have something for themselves. We're still on the backs of people less fortunate than us, no matter who we are. But I don't know that in the end I think of what the tethered were doing as something that fits a message so much as it is something that in a horror movie is meant to kind of strike fear in your mind, this notion of being completely eradicated.
Yeah.
This thing was meant to be, I guess we haven't alluded to Hands Across America at all, but it was meant to be like a dark parody of Hands Across America. And, the signs are now there throughout the movie that's what they're doing, what they're mobilizing to do. What did you guys think of the twist? And did you think of it as a twist that was supposed to be a secret? Were you at all surprised that Adelaide was actually a tethered who had swapped places with the surface girl years ago?
I was surprised. I had no idea.
I was a little surprised. Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of was, like, wondering about halfway through the film, like, not being able to see that entire flashback, like, what happened. It's kind of like, and then they dole out more and more footage of it. Like, it kind of started making me think that might be the case. And, but I mean, I thought it was handled pretty well. And I think my opinion on it is that I think everything we've discussed so far about what the movie's saying in ways is that, it kind of works because it shows, that somebody who is like kind of deemed, other, or, the tethered version of a person, can find success and can find a life of happiness and whatever that looks like or whatever we deem that to be, given the chance, given the privilege, given the access or anything like that Adelaide had with her family and, whatever her family's access was in our world or in the upper part of the above land. So I personally felt like that kind of works, or kind of just puts a little bit of a stamp on it for me to kind of just drive home this idea of, the effect on the real Adelaide, the character that we know as Red, and seeing kind of how, she kind of is sort of like when she first speaks, like John said, like how she's kind of become a bit more primitive and like losing her voice and not having language like she maybe had, even though she still held on to some of that, versus, this child that, swapped her situation for one that would give her access to things that she would never have. And I don't know, I just think that kind of just like drives it home for me. I mean, some people kind of feel like it maybe wasn't necessary, maybe it wasn't, but I mean, again, we're talking about a film that's a horror movie, so I mean, there's a bit of entertainment value there, I think, too. But I just really like I just really like the notion of, like we've all been saying, this idea of like, I don't know, I feel like, it's saying so many things about society and whatnot, but the idea that, society in every way, like we're all kind of still tied together in some way, that, we may not be aware of what the actions of, somebody with power and money is having on somebody without it, until you see something like that, or, until you see that the person that didn't have it can do just as good if they ever got a chance. And I don't know, it's just it's a lot of stuff going on with it, but I kind of dug the twist, and I kind of really liked the kind of, I love the scene, like when the son's looking at her and he kind of pulls his Chewbacca mask or whatever that mask was down, like he does when he's kind of like scared or intimidated or trying to, put up a shield. I like kind of ending the exchange between them with him pulling that mask down. I thought that was a really great choice.
It ends on a note where you're just beginning to think, wait a minute, did the villain win here? Or
Right.
like, who are you rooting more for? The little girl who had her freedom taken away when she was a little girl and put in this hell and fought her way out and formed this plan and somehow got, the coordination to ship the jumpsuits to all the right locations across the country and to get everybody those scissors.
John, they had a lot of time, man. They had a lot of time.
Yeah, I know they had nothing but time
Right,
down there.
right.
I got it. But there's just one person who can talk, so I really want to see what that courier system looked like. But anyway, no, that's the kind of stuff I mean when you just have to kind of gloss over the sort of magic
Sure.
of it. The explanation you get is that this was part of an experiment.
Sure.
And if you have the idea that the government was behind this, you can imagine that maybe there were jumpsuits down there or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter much. Why were the rabbits there? What was that all about? There's a lot of reasons you can read into the thematics of that. And I think there have been fan theories and speculation and explainers and all kinds of stuff online to dive into what the ambiguous parts of this story might be. And I think Jordan Peele is probably out there giving some answers, but I don't think he's putting everything in a capsule the way he would when he talked about Get Out after the fact. So I think this movie is meant to kind of be a little bit mysterious and weird. And I think that ending, to me, it sort of says this little boy knows that his mom is different, but maybe he's always sort of suspected it.
Yeah.
But I began to think, I mean, pretty much what you said, Steve, when they didn't show us the end of that scene at the beginning of the movie in the funhouse.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, she had to be switched, because why would you do it that way and not have that be the kicker? But I think both of you sort of alluded to this, that it came out more like a character reveal and less like a Shyamalan twist that was meant to make me put the movie in a different context. It was more about just understanding what this character is going through.
Sure.
And particularly the character of Red, the tethered version of Adelaide, that really was about what she's been going through. So yeah, at the end, you don't know whose story would be more sad. The story of the girl who escaped this horrible hellhole and then had to worry the rest of her life that she might get taken back, or the girl who had her freedom taken away. And you can't really begrudge Red's mission to get some kind of semblance of life back. And I think it's interesting how the movie does occupy both places of being a really pretty solid horror movie, as well as this allegory that I still feel like what we're doing is attempting to unpack a very dense narrative. I guess speaking of it as a horror movie, though, what were the moments that were scary to you, and how scary do you think it was, or how important was it to you that this movie even be scary?
The mirror house, that scared the shit out of me when the kid is there and she looks at herself and the choke and that face she makes. Man, I'm telling you, I have not, since I've seen it, there hasn't been a night that I haven't thought about that face. It's a very scary face.
No, it really is.
Seeing the tethered in the distance is just a nightmare to me. Like the idea of you being in a safe place.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it reminded me of so many movies that I loved before. What's the one about the family that comes in? Oh Jesus, and the guy gets shot with the shotgun.
Well, there's two different ones maybe the guy gets shot with the shotgun in The Strangers, but the family is in Funny Games.
That part reminded me of Strangers, and I remember when I saw it in the movies and that feeling of just like doom. Like once this tethered family came in their lives, everything's going to be different. You know,
right.
Like nothing, even if they make it out, Winston Duke said this really interesting thing where basically he said that the movie would have been 15 minutes long if he just would have listened to his wife. And there's something about the manipulation that he did to convince her to go to the beach that I didn't like at all. That I felt like, man, he's right. He could have just said no, listen to his wife, been a better husband, and this never would have happened.
I want to like this guy, but the Homer Simpson thing is 100% there.
Yeah.
He's being like, he's not trying to mess everything up, but he is being a doofus and like getting his way.
Yeah.
And later in the movie, when she says, you're not making decisions anymore, and she has to kind of slap him down, I thought that was such a powerful moment, because we've all been thinking it the whole movie that it's like he's been wrong every step of the way about what they should do, you know?
Right.
Even though he also is the brute force that he was able to, you know, he did okay for himself. He stayed alive in a way that I didn't necessarily think that character was gonna. If there was anybody that was gonna go, I was thinking it was gonna be goofy old dad there. But in fact, one of my favorite scenes was the scene where he fights his double on the boat and out in the middle of the lake. I thought that whole sequence was kind of funny, and it was also kind of creepy, just the dynamics of that boat driving around with the tethered drag behind it, literally tethered, I guess, to the boat. Yeah. But I liked later when they were taking when they were doing the body count, and he was like, "Well, technically, I'm winning because I got 2 of them." But each kid also was responsible for taking out their tethered, weren't they? It's more or less.
Yeah,
definitely.
And then the mom as well. In the end, actually in that case, it was the tethered who won. But that twist to me just kind of felt like, okay, that explains that part that I've been wondering about the whole movie, which is, well, why would they cut that scene and why would it be this kind of mystery? But yeah, you're right. It would have been the shortest movie ever if she had said. If he had just said, "Okay, honey, we don't have to go to the beach," and then that was
I love you and I trust your judgment. All right, bye.
Well, did you notice that his tethered was kind of an inarticulate doof who basically did what his wife or what his mate asked him to do? I loved the control and the hand signals and shit she had. That was an incredible aspect of that character. What did you think of this fan theory that Jason, the son, is it tethered? Or it just doesn't make much sense to me. I've read a couple of articles, but to me it feels like a reach. What do you think of that? That he's a tethered as well.
I think it's possible, man. I think it's possible. At some point, he could have gotten swapped out, and the face is burned, so he couldn't talk. That's possible.
I don't buy that one.
Yo,
the only reason why he doesn't make sense, like it makes more sense to me that he is a kid who's like potentially somewhere on the spectrum, and that this family has dealt with it in this very kind of gentle way without making a big deal out of it. And I feel like it was a subtle portrayal of a kid who's a little bit different.
I agree.
Without being heavy-handed. And if you made him a tethered, it kind of takes away from that subtle portrayal, particularly through that ending moment where he's perceptive enough to see there's something different about his mom, and he knows that she's not... Right. Or he knows something's up, but the fact that she kind of smiles at him in a way to say, I know and we're cool, and I'm actually still your mom, and I'm actually still the person who leads this family.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't really want to see the next part. I've heard people say they want to see a sequel, but to me, this felt like a story that was told at the end.
Yeah, leave it alone. Let it be.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, have you heard any other fan theories or Easter eggs or anything like that really stood out to you that you wanted to comment on before we wrap it up?
There's so many, but the one that I love only because it's an Easter egg, and it's only something I love because of how much I love the movie that it's nodding to. In the opening sequence, when they're at the Santa Cruz Pier, Adelaide's mother, when they're walking, says that they're filming a movie over by the merry-go-round or by the Ferris wheel. And that sequence takes place in 1986, and it's actually she's referring to them filming The Lost Boys in the film, and that film came out in 1987, and Jordan Peele has actually acknowledged that that's what she's talking about, that he's like referencing Lost Boys being filmed in Us at that pier in 1986.
Yeah, I heard that. I think that's really cool, man.
And I just love that because I like love that film. It's one of like my favorite like 80s like horror whatever. And anytime I think of Santa Cruz, I just like that boardwalk, that pier. I always think of Lost Boys, so it was really cool to like get that nod in there, just like a little wink to that film, and that's one that I think is really really kind of fun.
Well, he has said every detail of this movie is thought out, and I don't doubt that part is true.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that always makes a movie better, but if you do enjoy a movie and you enjoy digging into what's going on with, we keep talking about the memorable shots and the iconography and the kind of instantly just stick to your brain ideas that this movie has in it. So it's like it deepens the appreciation for the movie to know that attention to detail was there. So yeah, I don't doubt for a second that he was thinking of every possible way to pay tribute to this genre that he likes. The one thing I wondered, and I actually didn't check this, but I think it's the whack-a-mole guy at the county fair or whatever that is at the beginning, the boardwalk fair. I think he says, "That's what I'm talking about." And I actually was wondering, like, in 1986, that's what I'm talking about out there? Like, I honestly don't know when That's What I'm Talking About got started. Does anybody know? What's the origin of That's What I'm Talking About?
We'd have to use our smartphones and figure that out.
And we're just not doing it tonight. Maybe we'll follow up on this.
We should have a separate episode just to confirm or deny that.
We should.
Yes, I think we could. We could do an in-depth report and find all the cultural instances of it and maybe trace it back to...
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. He's like he's like a grungy bearded white dude.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think that's him. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
That is what I'm referring to as I speak.
Got it. Yeah, man. I don't know. That's all I've got for us. I again, you know, I need to see this movie a second time. Like, I've been trying to get back to see it again. It just hasn't worked out. And I don't know. Real quick, I don't know that I feel like I thought that it was that scary. I thought that it was, you know, there's some very, you know, frightening scenes or scary scenes and like some, you know, really well constructed set pieces that are disturbing and things like that. But I don't know that, like, you know, what people usually attribute to like scary and the jump scares and stuff like that. But I enjoy that. I mean, I don't need that, and I more enjoy some of those more disturbing images, like Rana was saying, like in the funhouse and the neck grab in the face, and you know, even just the, you know, looking out a window and seeing like the shadows of a body, and you know, up at the top of your driveway, and you know,
the family standing there like in formation.
It's just like, you know, I just really like that kind of stuff because it makes you more unsettled and uncomfortable than like that second of a scare that a jump scare will accomplish, which I love those too, but that's not really, I didn't feel like that's what this movie really brought to the table, even though there's a couple sequences where you have a couple jump scares that work pretty well. But I don't know, I just really, you know, there's a lot of just uncomfortable images and scenery and shots that really stuck with me. And just all of the intricacies of like the symbolism and the items, and the more and more you think about this movie, it's like literally you get stuck in a loop of like why everything meant something somewhere, and it's just like that's kind of more disturbing to me after the fact than like, you know, the jump scare in the moment.
It is, looking back now, one of the most spoilery trailers of all time. Like, once you've seen the movie, the trailer shows you a lot. Like, it shows you the mirror girl grabbing the neck.
Yeah.
So, I mean, certain moments looking back, it's like, yeah, that trailer actually does kind of ruin the surprise of maybe some of the imagery. But I think a lot of times, I heard someone say this is a movie where the second viewing is really the first viewing, because it's like the second viewing is the viewing where you know what it is you're watching, and now you're able to appreciate what it is.
Right.
So a very creepy movie, very atmospheric. But yeah, whether it's scary, it almost seems like a strange way to judge it.
So yeah, go see Us if you haven't. If you have, go see it again.
Yeah,
please see it.
And we'll talk about it more. We should you know, comment on this post when we post it up on the Facebook, or get into some sort. Let's talk about like what you thought about Us, and you know, your take on any of these theories or the Easter eggs. I mean, there's tons of lists out there. We can discuss them. We try to be a little more engagement on our Facebook post. So if you want to talk about it there, that'd be great. You can find our podcast on most of the podcast platforms of your choice: Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. We should be everywhere. And if you subscribe to any of those, please make sure you give us a rating, a review, whatever that platform provides. It would really, it really helps the podcast, and it helps more people find us, and you know, hopefully we could reach more people. That's our goal.
Speaking of broadening our audience, I've just gotten the email notification that we are now in all of the abandoned access tunnels that run underneath the United States.
That's going to double our audience at least.
I think it might double our audience, and we might start to get some really interesting feedback.
I love it.
Mostly groans.
I wonder what the Wi-Fi is like down there.
Shitty.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Sub-level.
Pretty shitty. Yeah, sub-level. All right, guys. Well, again, we're all saying go see Us. Let us know what you know of the movie. You know, let's talk about it on the thread. And what do we got coming up? We don't even really know what the next episode is going to be. We're going to kind of
235.
Roll with it as it comes. Yeah, it'll be number 235.
Got a 5 on it.
There it is. That's it. That's a great way to end the episode. John just put 5 on it. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.